He went to Paris looking for answers to questions that bothered him so. And welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is a Jimmy Buffett lyric, since we have some Flory days coming up. And we have a lot of questions that need answering after this Baku round, like how's everybody liking the sprint? And speaking of Paris, what's the FIA going to do about that fiasco at the end of the race? I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm doing great. Hello from the Emerald Isle. I am in Ireland. I thought that was I was going through my sort of internal memory of Taylor Swift lyrics to see if that's what you were singing. Interestingly, when Fernando Alonso was interviewed and asked by F1 reporters, by F1 reporter Will Buxton, whether or not there was any truth to the Taylor Swift rumors, he said he declined to comment, which I think is the most
amazing
Fernando Alonso-ass thing he could have done.
Can neither confirm nor deny.
Stoke those fires of lies.
How are you,
Rob? Well, two things. First of all, you didn't even tell me where those lyrics were from because, of course, that's just one of many songs I know by heart. Second, can you imagine, like, taking Taylor Swift to meet your friend Flavio?
If you're new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode, which assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 216. Also, this show is supported entirely by our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What's going on this month, Danny?
What did we say we're gonna? We still haven't decided what we're doing this month, have we?
We still haven't decided.
We talked about it last week. We still haven't decided.
What we could do is do a patron poll.
Oh, we love a patron poll around
that?
these parts. We could do a patron poll. Maybe between, a couple of different movies? Maybe
Yeah.
We've already done it. We just came off a primer, so maybe movie time could be a good idea. The primer we just did, though, I'm telling you, no better time. Great little race on the weekend in IndyCar, especially if you're an F1 fan.
Yeah.
If you want to keep an eye on the Phoenix, still chasing our first win. It was a nice, fun race on the weekend. I'll say nothing more. So if you're a patron or thinking about becoming it and you want to listen to us talk about IndyCar, it was like 2 hours long, wasn't it? It was a pretty long one.
This is a sizable primer, yeah.
Yeah, it's a sizable racing.
It's no less than one of the best racing series in the world, and maybe the best open wheel racing series in the world deserves.
Dangerous words, Rob Zachney, to say on this podcast. A massive thanks to all of our incredible title sponsors: Toby Montana, Cyphus Training -Turf SCS (Joe M), Alex Medina, Kick a Hat Off the Art at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, IronStation.dev, TelemetryDeck.com, David Mule, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foote, Abdullah Altani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, #Bunny Crimes, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Valtar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, Umberto Roca, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Maddened Man, and Jason Kelly. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you all, patrons out there. And we thank you for letting us jump right into this episode because we have so much to get to, so many sessions to talk about, and a pre-race for the upcoming Miami Grand Prix. So,
can I just
Rob,
open
you had something?
Yeah. Yes, there was, because I just want to take us, I had a moment on Friday. I had a shitty week. And Waypoint Radio listeners may understand why my week sort of took a nosedive, toward the end. But Friday rolls around, and I was so excited that there was an F1 qualifying on Friday. For a minute there, I was like, "Hey, hang on, I might have been too harsh on this new format." Relevant on-track action happening on Friday. Here I am at the end of the week. This is fun. I like this. I was a little concerned, this track feels smaller than it ever has before, and it feels like maybe it's just the tires have gotten bigger in the last couple of years, but I was a little concerned how many incidents there seem to be, and like how many of them seem to like bring the action to a screeching halt every time it happened. But still, on Friday, I was way too harsh about the sprint format. Like that's my inherent conservatism leading me astray. This could be cool. And then the rest of the weekend happened.
Rough times.
Yeah,
look, we have said for a while
go for
here,
it, Danny.
when will there be the bad Baku? Like we've all been saying it. Baku, any racetrack is possible about having a bad race. We've been sort of surprised by how good Baku has been over the years. Oftentimes, not necessarily because of the track, but just stuff that's interesting tended to happen there anyway. Be it like argy-bargy between Vettel and Hamilton, or the Grosjean safety car crash, whatever it was. There was always something interesting that happened. So at least now we have finally figured out that Baku is human, and that you can also have bad races there. Apparently, especially if you shorten the DRS on the track.
Well, let's jump right into the contentious part of it, the sprint stuff. So this is the first time we're doing the sprint shootout. So to recap here, like Rob said, we had practice and then qualifying on Friday. Then we had the shootout, which is sprint qualifying for the sprint, and then the sprint on Saturday, and then followed by the race on Sunday. And like we mentioned in the previous episode, the sprint qualifying and the sprint are self-contained. The grid for the sprint is set by its own qualifying session, and the finish of the sprint has no bearing on the grid for the race because that's set by regular qualifying, which occurred on Friday. So the sprint shootout, as it's called, the qualifying session, is like regular qualifying but with shorter sessions, meaning I thought this was interesting. You don't see people pitting between fast runs. You kind of just go out there and, fuel your car for the whole session. We see a lot of track evolution, a lot of cars getting faster as the fuel goes down, a lot of traffic. I thought it was pretty frenetic. What were your impressions, Danny, of the sprint shootout?
Yeah, I think I watched it after the fact. I watched highlights. I got to watch all of it was via highlights because I was bouncing around with my family here in Ireland. I watched the two races full length to length, but after the fact. I don't know. I kind of was hoping that the shorter laps would mess up the grid a little bit. I think there's a lot of conservatism, or I was worried that there was, because it's one of those tracks where if you push too hard, you might get bit. Like Leclerc, has actually always done really well here, but there was, of course, that famous time he clipped the wall during qualifying as well. I was mostly just kind of really interested in what was going on at Verstappen, because he just seemed to be off the pace, and as we'll talk about the entire race weekend, just frazzled or something, just not like mentally there this weekend, or touchy or whatever it was. There's a chicken and an egg thing here, where maybe it was the on-track action that was doing that, but also he looked like, every once in a while when you see like a soccer player who's having a bad run of form, and then you find out there's some like family thing that's going on. I was kind of like, oh, why is he so off the boil this weekend? Like, why is he so touchy and not really there? But that was the thing that I was kind of like looking at afterwards, because I had gone into the sprint sort of already seeing what the grid was like, so that was what I was interested in.
Yeah, what were your thoughts, Rob, on the shootout?
Not very good. Like, it was, I think it was, like, I think this is where I started to really have some doubts about the format. The sheer number of cars that were either compromised by yesterday's running, or like had incidents during the shootout that was going to compromise them for later, or maybe for the race. The shootout was the first one where it was really disrupted, right? Was that the one where we were getting like red flags?
Yeah, it was 2 red flags.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sargent crashed at the end of SQ1 that brought out a red flag, and then Leclerc set the fastest time in SQ3 and then crashed into a wall.
Yeah, it was just like it was where, and also I consistently had this feeling this weekend where either the cars are sliding in ways that the drivers haven't really gotten a feel for, or they cannot see the dimensions of the car, the wheels relative to the track, and it was causing issues here in particular, because this is always a track where there are places where it's not necessarily the most challenging thing technically that you're trying to do, but your margin for error is like razor thin. That the correct line has like an error bar of only a few centimeters really on either side. But this, like in other years, it's felt like that makes it more exciting because the drivers are right on the edge, but they're consistently on the right side of that edge for the most part, except for memorably like clipping it going into the castle. But here, this is the first year it just felt consistently like drivers were just thwacking the wall and being like, hell, I clipped it, I didn't mean to, and that seemed to set a tone that was concerning. I keep coming back to the size of the tires, that like the visibility maybe seems impaired, and also just the dynamics for how they wear and heat up and cool down may not be driving the most thrilling action in the races. But yeah, so like there was that, and also it was just like it's a second qualifying. And I guess, the point of comparison I would make is if they're looking for ways to change it up, chopping the qualifying down I don't think is it. I think F1 might be suffering from a bit of not invented here. I think if you're looking for a different format, the Indy qualifying format is superior for a change of pace. Like, you do the knockout rounds, you cut the field down, and then you have your best of the best battle royale, and that can generate fluky enough results where like you might have some like premier drivers drop out in their group stage, and then you might have sort of an odd mix when you're doing sort of the setting the final, the top 6 or the top 10 of the grid. But like either way, it was like, here's another qualifying, and it's a little bit worse.
Yeah, I'm with you. We need a different, a more different qualifying style. I would be up for actual shootout like Formula E, where you get one lap to do one as fast as you can, and then that's your time.
I was worried you were like, we give them all pistols with one gun and a dagger, with one bullet and a dagger, and we turn them loose on the circuit. And I was like, I don't know, it's certainly a bold suggestion, but I don't know if we're there yet.
The sprint finally shook out like this for the sprint grid. Charles Leclerc qualified in the shootout with the fastest time, followed by Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. Then we've got George Russell, Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, Alex Albon in 7th, Fernando Alonso in 8th, Lance Stroll, Lando Norris in 10th, then Oscar Piastri, Nico Hülkenberg, Kevin Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly, Nick De Vries, and then Ocon required to start from the pit lane because his car was modified under parc fermé conditions, and Sargent withdrew from the sprint after crashing in the shootout. So we get to the sprint, which is a lot like Whose Line Is It Anyway? Everything is made up and the points don't matter. I saw the phrase practice with points a lot. I think that was a Lewis Hamilton-ism, and I feel like that is how I've been thinking about it. The most exciting part here, I think, was in the opening, Russell versus Verstappen.
My only note.
Speaks Rob.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, this is the only thing that made any impression.
Yeah,
the only thing people were talking about after the race as well. Sorry if I'm a bit laggy.
It's true.
From Ireland here, but yeah.
It's fine. We'll blame it on the Atlantic. They go side by side through turns 1, 2, and 3. Russell not giving an inch. He did crunch into the side of Verstappen, opening up quite a gash on his side pod, causing some radio frustration from Verstappen, to which his engineer responded something along the lines of, they've got nothing to lose, but you do. And this speaks to your point, Danny, about him being a little frazzled this weekend. I thought it was really interesting because it felt like we had been seeing a new, more mature Verstappen this year, but this felt very much like the old one, fighting tooth and nail for everything, even if it jeopardizes his championship.
I disagree. Because here's what I would argue. I think Russell was playing the part of Verstappen a few years back. I think Max bailed George out from an accident. I think in each of those corners, George didn't quite have it. In each of those corners, Max was making the move to like go to the edge where there was like no more room and like provide that little bit of breathing space so they didn't take each other out. I certainly felt like even before the incident happened, I was like, oh man, like George is almost getting these moves done, but also like Max was being pretty generous with the amount of space left. And then the third one, there was nowhere Max was like could have gone at that point, and George did sort of slide over. I liked the racing. I like that people are going for these moves. The thing I wasn't here for was like, Max is kind of familiar whining at this point about this kind of thing. But I think what's so funny about it is he is also now thoroughly that he's a front runner, and he's like, why are we taking these chances? It's totally absurd. Someone would try to go under someone else at this corner. And it's not absurd at all. He used to the moves like that used to be his bread and butter, but now he's like, shouldn't we all just play the percentages? This is irresponsible. I think he does have a bit of a case though, because like consistently George couldn't quite bring those moves off, and each time it just felt to me like he was understeering and Max was backing out enough or moving over enough to prevent them from collecting each other.
Yeah, it's definitely like the hypocrisy of it is very easy to see, in that like diving up the inside and forcing the other driver to make the choice between backing out or there possibly being collision was Max's modus operandi, and it was because for the most part they had a car that was a half step behind that Mercedes, and he had to throw it in, like, to make it happen, and he had to be aggressive. And we had a lot of conversations over the years in this podcast about, is he being too aggressive? Is he fighting that hard because he has to, and XYZ. And you're right, we're basically in a role reversal situation where Russell now is having to do this. Max knows that his car is basically, and this is part of the problem this weekend, the Red Bull is incredibly overpowered. He's not driving anyone else. He shouldn't be driving anyone else. If he didn't have a gash on the side of his car, he wouldn't have been worried about driving anyone else except for his teammate. But Max now is in the privileged position of being in the best car, and when you're in that car, you can't drive like the scrappy underdog anymore. Unfortunately, you have to play the part of the smart, like, patient professor, even if it's not sexy, even if it's not in your nature.
And I think like his sort of kiss off remarks to Russell after the race, where he was like, next time I'll do exactly the same or something. And what's so funny about that is like Max knows he can't. I think that's part of his frustration, is he can't do that anymore because like the percentages are such that like he needs to bring those points home, because he and Sergio may still be like cool right now, but I think they both know that it's one of those things where probably the championship is going to be decided on consistency. Sergio's having a really good run of consistency. Max isn't having a bad one, but like just one of those things where they're going to be, it's like a home run derby over at Red Bull, and that's the battle they are in. But it does mean that Max can't, Russell can do that because that car isn't very good, really, and it certainly wasn't good here. And I think the other part of this is, I think when Max came in, driving standards were a bit more conservative. I do think Max worked a change in the grid a little bit by being super aggro. Yeah. And it was sort of this declaration that, like, you can move over and give me space or I'm coming through you. And I think that did, like, gave a psychological advantage in a lot of these encounters. But the grid has reshuffled a bit now. It's peers of his, it's people who sort of observed his career a little more closely in development ranks. And a bit like, and even people like Lewis also saw what was happening, and everyone's kind of adapted to, but you just have to call his bluff and show that you were willing to race him the same way, and he's not going to like that. Like once both cars are willing to be like, if he dies, he dies, then suddenly this style of racing is a little less fun and a little less viable. So I think that's the other part of this is, Max can't race that way in the situation he is in, and also racing that way doesn't yield the same like tactical advantages that it did a few years ago.
Yeah.
Also not viable racing with three wheels. We cut to, on lap 2, Yuki Tsunoda having shedded the rubber part of his rear tire from its hub, causing it to comically roll down the hill after him. The team earned a fine for this because he had hit the wall earlier, came in for a pit stop, and was like, I think my car is damaged, but the team was like, nah, it's fine, and sent him back out.
Is this the one where like
even though
the
his
rear
car was
axle was
busted.
visibly twisted back?
Yeah,
and
they checked him for a good couple of minutes. They were like they were kind of looking at the front wheels a bit too much and not enough of the back
but it was
wheels.
so obvious from the back. Like, I guess if you're standing right next to it, maybe you don't fully see how clearly like twisted it is. But like, I feel like if you're an F1 mechanic, you should see that.
Yeah.
Race Fans has the conversation from their radio. So he hit the wall earlier at turn 13. His race engineer says, we do a pit stop and go out again. Tsunoda says, I don't think so because I already hit the wall, so no, I think it will be damaged quite a lot. Look at the right side specifically, or especially.
He could feel
After
it.
his wheels were replaced and the mechanics looked over the car, Tsunoda was released back out onto the racetrack. We go again, Yuki. The car is good.
What was also like this speaks to what Rob was talking about as well, about people crashing in or like hitting the wall in place. It was such a bizarre place to hit the wall. It was like
The whole weekend.
Obviously
People
with a
were
lot
hitting-
of people clipping the inside of whatever that was, turn 3 or 4, right? The last of those left-handers. But this was like, if this is one of those fake turns that's basically a straight. He's just like before turn 15, where people are usually hitting, they're making that exit road comparison. We had a bunch of people do it this week. Gasly, I think, did as well, where you either have to this is where Sargent crashed, I think, where you either have to dive down the escape road or turn. But he crashed like on the way up to it, and then later in the main race, I think Hülkenberg also hit that wall. So even the veterans, it was just very weird.
Oh, yeah.
Like Rob said, I don't think they could.
Both of the Red
Quite
Bulls
see
crashed the
everything.
wall in the race.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Well, we get a safety car for Yuki, restart on lap 5. Despite some floor damage from the Russell collision, Verstappen does get the place back from Russell at turn 1. Lap 7, Perez gets by Leclerc with DRS for the lead. A few more passes. Piastri gets Norris with DRS for 10th. Piastri, by the way, with the stomach bug that he says he got through the weekend on 4 pieces of toast.
Oh, God.
So, always impressive. And then Lance Stroll, I think with one of the more entertaining passes from the weekend, takes a Ricciardo-like lunge from downtown at turn 1 on Albon for 8th place. The final points-paying position, and this is how the sprint ended. Sergio Perez on top gets the full 8 points. Then we trickle down points-wise by 1. So Charles Leclerc in 2nd gets 6th. Then we got Max Verstappen in 3rd, George Russell in 4th, Carlos Sainz in 5th, Fernando Alonso in 6th, Lewis Hamilton in 7th, Lance Stroll in 8th. So then we go to Sunday, the race grid, with Charles Leclerc ending up on top, pole position, just like he did for the shootout. Behind him will start Max Verstappen, then Sergio Perez, followed by Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Lando Norris in 7th, Yuki Tsunoda in 8th, Lance Stroll in 9th, and Oscar Piastri starts 10th. George Russell will start 11th, followed by Alex Albon, Valtteri Bottas, Logan Sargent, Zhou Guan Yu, Kevin Magnussen, Pierre Gasly, Nick De Vries, Esteban Ocon, and Nico Hülkenberg. De Vries failed to set a qualifying time, but races at the discretion of the stewards. Ocon and Hülkenberg both start from the pit lane after their cars were modified under Parc Fermé. And Pierre Gasly's car did well to even get to qualifying because he had a fire in practice. Danny, do you want to take us through the start?
Not much to say, mate, to be honest.
Yeah, I know.
They all got there pretty easily. There was a bit of fun argy-bargy between Hamilton and Alonso for those first couple of turns, especially when they like to go nice and wide down that first DRS straight after turn 2. But no, it was kind of ducks in a row, which also spoke perhaps to what the rest of the race might be.
Piastri did get hit by Albon.
Yeah.
Some carbon fiber.
Is that why Stroll and Russell were able to just like make mincemeat out of him at the start?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the thing I'll say is it was so evident. Like I have a sinking feeling. Lap 2, where they bring up the it's Leclerc leading, and it's Verstappen right behind him, right?
Yeah.
And they're showing the top speeds they're reaching on the straight, because I was like, that doesn't look good. And they're showing the speeds, and I was like, okay, it's not quite as bad as I thought, but like the Red Bull's a little faster, and then it dawns on me that DRS isn't active. And And they're like, well, okay, that when DRS goes active, maybe he will try, heading in 2-3. And I was like, no, of course he's not. No one, like, no Red Bull's going to try anyone in 3 this week. Like, that straight line speed? Are you kidding me? No, like, 3s, why would you risk going into that corner that nobody can figure out? When, meanwhile, you could just make these people look like they're standing still on the main straight, which is what happened. Like, again and again. Yeah. It was brutal how much faster that Red Bull is.
Yeah.
Different class of straight line speed than the Ferrari. It was grim, and it was over, and then it was like, this is now for a moment there, it looked like it was Verstappen's race to lose, but you know what? Even before the thing happened, Perez was closing on him. There was a Perez-Verstappen battle taking shape that I think we were actually robbed of a little bit, because I think it might have been more interesting if we hadn't had that yellow, because once Perez got past the Ferrari, he was closing, like, it looked like he was closing up on Max. And I was curious where that was going to go. I'll say this, for a minute, I thought the timing of the yellow and the fact that they will call strategy for the lead driver first, I thought that was going to work in Max's favor.
Yeah, I think this points to what I'm taking as the silver lining from this weekend is that Perez is a threat, at least right now. He's had a really good run of form, and maybe this also speaks, Danny, to why Max is feeling a little frazzled, because it's not a done deal. At least as we stand at the end of the 4th round of the season. Lap 10 with Verstappen reporting that he's sliding around on his tires. We cut to De Vries off the track and yellow flags being waved. De Vries clipped the wall on the apex and damaged his front left suspension. 8 seconds later, Verstappen pits. So right away, Julian Palmer on the F1 commentary says this will be bad if there's a virtual safety car or a safety car, and almost immediately we get a safety car, meaning that everyone else can pit while the rest of the field is going slowly, meaning effectively they get faster pit stops than Verstappen.
Yeah, another one that lost out was Hamilton, right? I think he pitted. Did he pit?
He had just pitted
prior or something. Yeah,
yep.
Before the incident had even happened. Not totally scuppered his race then.
Yeah, so after the fact, these quotes from race fans, Christian Horner, team principal of Red Bull, described the decision-making process. He says, as a collective, it comes up the chain. The strategists make the recommendation. The team manager is controlling the pit stop and obviously looking at the circuit in terms of whether it's yellow or not and the probability of a safety car. The race engineer is obviously looking at it as well, so we have a process. At one stage, we're talking about gearing up for a double stop, which, imagine that. There was a quick shot of De Vries, and it was just a black set of lines, said Horner. It looked like he had outbraked himself, gone straight on, and hadn't hit the barrier. Usually if you see it in the barrier, it's a safety car. But there was no sign of him having hit the barrier, so it was only subsequently, I think, on the replays that you were able to see that a track rod was broken. So that was it. They just saw it and called him in. As a result, Perez and Leclerc jumped Verstappen in the pits, Perez taking the lead of the race and Leclerc in second. Restart on lap 13. Verstappen wastes no time jumping Leclerc for second without DRS. I think that was actually in turn 3. And around the same time, Alonso makes a great move on the inside of Carlos Sainz for 4th place. This is another kind of silver lining here. To this season, where we initially thought, like, the Red Bulls are going to run away with it. Fernando Alonso's being really fun to watch.
Weird.
And being weirdly, holier than thou or nice to his teammate. It was.
No, I don't. Yeah, not holier than thou, but like Corinne Chandos thought, who is this moment? Was like I had also had this feeling of like, wow, this dude loves rich people. Like maybe it's not that, but like they're like when Stroll, for a minute I was impressed how well they were coordinating. Stroll being like, I'm pulling into DRS when I'm not attacking, and Alonso's like, you could have a go. Hamilton's wheels are graining. We could just like, we're gonna get him. And then later he's like, tell Lance to play with the brake balance. Try this. It didn't work out. Doesn't look like, but like he's chattier on the radio, just period, as he's like sort of strategizing in clear air about like the state of the race. But then there's also this like a bit like, in the early parts of the Fassbender series where it's like Felipe like Lazar is out there and they're doing lead follow, and there's just all these coaching sessions that appears to be happening, which is just bizarre because like Alonso has psychologically tried to shatter any teammate that he's shared a garage with, and when he can't shatter them, they become like mortal enemies. This is a weird dynamic.
It's pretty fun to watch. And then, I don't know, we get some more passes. Hamilton gets Russell and Stroll for 6th place. Gasly on Bottas for 18th. More people clipping the wall. Stroll, the 2 Red Bulls. Lap 45, Hülkenberg gets passed by Norris for 10th place.
Hülkenberg had such an amazing comeback race. They changed the setup, but there was like a fatal flaw in the plan, which was that they were going to put him on hards at the start, and they were going to wait for a safety car, but the safety car came too early.
Yeah.
And every other session, it felt like there had been more stoppages or more yellows. There were more opportunities to like have the strategy play out, and it just did not come for Haas, and they were just waiting for that opportunity, and so he went over the cliff, and that entire race went for naught because those last few laps, effectively, he is going backwards.
Yeah, also, same strategy. Esteban Ocon also started from the pit lane, had not yet pitted at that point, and leaves his pit stop waiting for that safety car to the very end. So late, in fact, that photographers were already starting to crowd into the pit lane and had to scamper out of the way when, surprise, an F1 car is coming.
Did you hear
it was
Sky commentary for this? Because they had Ted Kravitz in
Ted
real
Kravitz
time.
sounded like it sounded
Ted
like
sounded scared.
It sounded like the Hindenburg call, to me, it looked a lot like the Stanford Cal. The band is that on the field. Just wild that something like this could happen. Conveniently not shown on the YouTube highlights. By the way.
Yeah.
Well,
but well done.
I think
Bucky.
they showed the Ocon onboard on YouTube though. I think they put that up separately.
Did they
I
really?
think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And apparently, I watched the Ted's Notebook thing afterwards. Apparently, they are. Whoever is in charge of that part of it was called to the stewards, so I'm not sure what the issue. Yeah.
According to Autosport, the FIA quote summoned its own Parc Ferme representatives in front of the stewards. But it's another one of these cases where no rules were broken. It's just that no one thought there was anything wrong with the procedure until something bad happens. The FIA issued a bulletin saying, we walked through the relevant procedures and protocol with the FIA representatives in detail and required them to take immediate steps to reconsider these procedures and protocols with the relevant stakeholders, including the Formula One management, the teams, and the FIA, to ensure that this situation does not occur again. The representatives expressed their regret at what happened and assured us they would do so in time for the next event. Esteban Ocon, for his part, said, arriving at 300 kilometers an hour, braking very late, and I see the barriers and all the people all around. If I miss the braking point, it's a big disaster. So that is a crazy moment.
It's also like a particularly blind pit lane because they have that little chicane thing to slow them down a little bit on the way in. It is worth mentioning that like there are like sort of somewhat loosey rules around this with which you will notice when the lead car's garage will run out and jump up on the thing, right? And they've been trying to tamp down on that too. There's a couple of like reasons why it's not so crazy an issue. One, that garage tends to be at the end of the pit lane generally, rather than close to the top, because that's the order in which it's done by the championship order. But like you said, even Ted was making reference to that, like that usually people know if there's a mandatory stop. Like usually people are aware of the fact that there's a mandatory stop, and they all knew for laps and laps and laps that he was going to have to come in, unless there was a red flag would be the only thing I think that would get him out of that. I think even if there's something else, unless the pit lane's closed, I think is the only thing, and I think still he might get in trouble even if he couldn't do his last pit stop.
I could have sworn they used to have a rule where you couldn't have the one lap you did on a tire compound be your out lap. That you had to do a lap at race pace on the tire for it to qualify for the race. I could have sworn there used to be like a rule where you couldn't do this thing where you would stop on the literal last lap, drive on the new tire, and then bring it in.
There was the Schumacher rule where he pitted, but he crossed the line before he pitted. He
crossed the line in the finish line.
Yeah, in the pit lane. Yeah, so
the pit lane. Weird moment. I do hope they fix that. But the race ended like this: Sergio Perez taking the full 25 points. Max Verstappen in second, Charles Leclerc rounding out the podium. Fernando Alonso finished in fourth, followed by Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, Lance Stroll, George Russell, who pitted late to set the fastest lap of the race, Lando Norris in ninth, and Yuki Tsunoda in 10th. Behind them, we've got Oscar Piastri, Alex Albon, Kevin Magnussen, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, Logan Sargent, Nico Hulkenberg, Valtteri Bottas, and then the two DNFs of Zhou Guanyu, which I don't remember why that happened, and Nick de Vries.
I think it was just retirement. I remember seeing him pull in, I want to say, and they were just kind of calling it. But I think the last thing I'd say about the sprint weekend is, for it wasn't just that, all the races were kind of boring. Baku didn't bring the heat this time, and I think one issue with the sprint format is also that it turns out if you take tire strategy out of an F1 race, the odds of it being interesting are very, very low. The sport and the tires are sort of tuned to work together to create interesting action and strategy. And if you eliminate that, which the sprint largely does, you don't have a particularly dynamic race. I think it's way easier to follow a processional when you still have the curveball factor of the pit cycles in play. Take that out, it becomes much less interesting, even if the cars are fundamentally doing the same thing. But I think my biggest issue is just, one, I guess there's too much shitty racing. This is a big part of it. It was just it was a lot of my weekend watching races that I'm not particularly engaged by. But two, it had no sense of arc to it. I was shocked by how much on Sunday. I was like, what happened yesterday? What was Saturday? Couldn't really remember. Didn't matter, and didn't feel like it mattered to the race either. It was this weird thing of Saturday is so self-contained that it doesn't become part of the weekend in a weird way. I don't know. It's just there's no sense of building action to the weekend. It just kind of felt like there was a race. There was a day that didn't matter, and there were 2 days that kind of did.
Yeah, and I think it's actually worse because of it, because it dilutes. For me personally, I think it dilutes the interest I have in the race. We had 3 weeks. I should have been jonesing for this race, right? But then by the time we got there, I was like, I've seen so much Baku. All right, I guess I'm watching this race now.
Yeah, there was a couple of things that I had a problem with. One, the sprint race ended up being a real telegraph of the strategy for the main race. You could tell what how Red Bull were going to win the Grand Prix just based on how they attacked the sprint race. It was funny because I remember we were talking about how, if they have less practice time, perhaps that's the thing that will shake it up. But actually it turns out doing a shorter race is actually a really good practice for the race. You know what I mean? Maybe too much. I do also think that there is a particular environmental issue with this track, and also maybe something more worrying about this year's cars, is that one, all the drivers complained that they had really bad dirty air following people, which is what the new regs were supposed to have mostly gotten rid of, and now maybe that we're so far from that moment we've forgotten that that's supposed to be the case, but that was a massive issue. And two, they had shortened that DRS zone, I would presume, not because of Red Bull or anything. I doubt that would seem like a sporting mishap, but it was presumably they had been talking about shortening DRS and generally trying to move away from DRS over a slow period of time, perhaps because of the new regulations. But what happened was you created a track where the only car that could use DRS was Red Bull because they were so powerful in it, and nobody else had, because of the dirty air and because of the smaller DRS, they couldn't overtake. So it was even more in Red Bull's favor this time around. So I think Baku had its sort of maybe shortening the DRS didn't help it, but there does seem to be a sort of maybe more worrying issue when it comes to the cars not being able to follow each other in dirty air again, which I'm interested in just how that happened and whether that's something that's worse this year than last year.
Yeah, that's a good point. That I had noted that, but I'd sort of not fully appreciated the ramifications of what some of that driver feedback was, which is historically the engineers have always clawed back. You take away aerodynamic downforce, they find a way to get it back on, and it just happens again and again. That's always been the war, and it could be that once again we've had an off season where the engineers have found it, and it is creating bad wash for following cars. For me, I just keep going back to the tires too. There's something like they're not driving interesting action. They seem to be either they're making drivers struggle in ways that are not terribly interesting. I think part of it is the cars are so big that when the drivers are struggling, there's kind of a wallowing quality to a modern F1 car that is as fun to watch. It might also just be that the whole 3-compound system has created too much of a smooth gradient in tire performance that again, comparing to Indy, I come back again and again to it's very rare that both those tire sets are good. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the reds and the blacks are both fine, and people can feel like they can race on both. But when that happens, it's almost a surprise to the engineers. A lot of times there's a strong sense of we have really coarse-grained instruments that we can apply to this course, and how we use them is going to be really significant, and what our tire strategy is going to bear a lot on how the race unfolds. And here it just kind of feels like everyone converges on the same array of tires, and you get the same performance characteristics off them from car to car. It just kind of matters how fast is the baseline of the car. And what you don't get is a sense of anyone's doing anything very different from one another in ways that are creating interesting clashes of strategy.
Which you could look at the Astons. Their whole thing is that they're great on degradation, and they could not play with the Ferraris this week at all because the hard was just so good. Carlos Sainz, they were no, we think plan A is going to be okay. Just keep going. You'll last the whole race. And then the Astons had no way back into the race as a result,
Well, I do have one issue of contention here. There was good racing this weekend in F1 Academy, as we mentioned.
And a lot of it.
And a lot of it. Last weekend, or last episode, we mentioned that F1 Academy is starting this past weekend. F1 Academy is the Formula One feeder series for women. It is aiming to get female drivers into Formula 3. So there was confusion whether it would be live streamed or televised at all. It was not. The YouTube comments on this highlights video on F1's YouTube channel are livid because they did film it, and there is a commentator.
It's as well produced as Formula 3 and probably Formula 2 is. It's got.
It doesn't have the timing stand on the graphics, which I
which people
wish
were
they
also
would
complaining
add.
about. Yeah.
But the lack of live streaming to me just strikes me as a TV rights issue
Yeah.
at this point. Like they haven't secured a partner yet. But like, come on, you got to just put it on YouTube or
Mother's
Twitch or
Polish.
something.
There's a chance for the most sexist ad campaign and placement opportunity in history.
Maybe that's what
Wow.
it was. Yeah, but it was great to see. Like, also 3 races was crazy because you watched that highlights video, and after like a quarter of the video, the race is over, and I was like, "Oh, is the rest of this interviews?" And it was like post-race interviews.
No, we got 2 more
next
races.
race, go. Next race, go. And it was fun. It reminded me a lot of watching like F3, or like European Formula 3 or something, where it's racy. Like everyone's like going for it. There's action everywhere. There's some, weird moves maybe. You know what I mean? Like there's that like they're obviously professionals, but they're on the lower end. So that adds an element of chaos that's quite fun. Like somebody slowed down.
Like college sports.
Yeah, totally. So someone like to kind of slow down maybe a little bit too much on a turn, and it ended up having this interesting concertina where people had to figure stuff out. So it's cool, and Spielberg's a good track for it too as well. I think it's a fun track and plenty wide, and it just shows you how like you get overtakes. Like the tracks when you're driving in cars that aren't as fast as Formula 1 cars, the tracks are really long because you don't go as fast. So it's interesting watching just how much when you see people overtaking on the way to a corner and then having a different overtake at the corner, it reminds you of how racy racing can be, and just tends to not be when you're going 250 miles an hour all the time.
Right. Well, I hope they figure that out because I think there's like 150,000 views on the YouTube video. So
Yeah.
people are interested.
So
It's good. It's comparable to F2 highlights for sure.
I had sort of missed this until it hadn't occurred to me until just now. But there's a piece of news that dropped like in sort of an awkward place between our last show and the race. Franz Tost being pushed out at AlphaTauri.
What?
Oh, and yes,
It's
and,
not,
and
dude. It's not amicable. Like
is
this
it
it is not good. So there's this like
the Ferrari guys in over there,
right. Everyone was like, "Where's Mekis going?" And is Ferrari basically burning down in the background of this? Who knows? But Mekis is leaving, and he's going to AlphaTauri. And apparently, like the announcement of it was not like Tost's choice. And it really seems like Franz Tost is being just shoved out the door. Which is
Wow, I completely missed
He's
this.
in an advisory role or something, isn't he? But like, yeah, whatever that means.
yeah, but like it's a real curveball because like I mean we saw in Drive to Survive, what was it, a year or two ago, where Christian is talking about how Yuki needs that that final white glove Franz Tost treatment to sort of bring him up to standard. And I mean he had like he is kind of that team in a lot of ways, but there have been signs that something's like slipped loose in that organization. Like Franz Tost 2 weeks ago or a month ago at this point, talking about like, I don't trust my fucking engineers. These guys suck, and they said the car would be good and it's trash. So like it's clearly that like the vibe shifted, as they say, over at AlphaTauri, and it's not like the most like spiteful breakup we've seen in racing, but also this is a far cry from like a gentle like valedictory tour through F1. Like Tost is being pretty pointed that like didn't like how it's being handled, didn't like that the news leaked, didn't like that the announcement was rushed in response to the leak, and fundamentally doesn't seem totally happy with the fact that like it's come to this. Even though he did see in one interview, he did sort of make the remark that I'm 67, and I always knew that he said I made it clear that. Sorry, this is a really interesting way to put it. It was my decision, and it started 2 years ago. Discussed it also with Dietrich Mateschitz in those days because I'm now 67 years old, and I made it clear that at 70. I would not be any more in the pit lane. This I made very clear. And now I'm going into the 70s. It's time to say goodbye. It makes me think he thought he would hang it up at age 70, and not that, like, what if 70 could be now?
Yeah, well, it's also like 4 races in. Like nobody's making those changes 4 races into a season unless there's some extraneating factors or something, you know.
Yeah. Well, if there's no more news, and there doesn't appear to be too much, let's take it to Miami, Danny.
Yeah, Miami. Welcome to Miami, like Will Smith's backup singers said in that one song, in Big Willie style, an album
Timely.
I bought when I was probably 12 years old. We're going back to Miami, the Hard Rock Stadium complex in the Miami Gardens, also known as the Miami Dolphins parking lot. This is a 57-lap race. It's the second year we're having it. Last year was its inaugural Grand Prix. And I hate to say it, but I don't much rate this circuit. Last year's race was novel because it was the first time we were there. It had that weird little bit where they cross over the road. It had interesting camera angles because there's like a highway beside it.
Boats.
They had the
boats?
fake marina. I don't know if the fake marina's back. They could be filling in the fake sand right now.
Well, remember, it just flooded.
That's a good point. Yes, it could be a real marina at this stage. No, this is it reminds me of a Formula E track where it's just like a big parking lot and you just make up a bunch of turns. There are 3 DRS zones on this. One of them is super small on the start-finish straight. Then there's a sort of a one at the end of Sector 2, and then there's the main one at the end of Sector 3, and those constitute the 3 places where you will see overtaking. Not much maybe last year on turn 1. I think Alonso had one where he had a bit of contact with, I think it was Tsunoda. Turn 17 is where we saw most of them, which is the long DRS right before the end of... There's only 19 turns on this track. And that's generally where people did it. Last year's race was a bit of a snooze fest, honestly. The only thing I can really remember is Lando Norris had a big off because I think he got one of his rear tires got touched up and he got hit there, but and he spun off. But yeah, I'm not a massive fan of this one, and like obviously it speaks to the whole we're trying to expand the American market, but you know, last year we were saying there are plenty of circuits in Florida, let alone America, where you could do this. And maybe building one in a car park like you did in Vegas isn't the coolest thing in the world. They've obviously tried to gussy it up a bit, and they tried to make a big deal about it, and they did a lot of fanfare. But I suspect this is going to be a circuit people don't like, and it also makes me worried about Vegas more and more and more and more, because that's kind of what Vegas is as well. I mean, that's more of a street circuit because it's literally on, at least some of it's on roads, but yeah, I wish I could be more optimistic about this week's race, but I'm not a massive fan.
I think Miami's getting up in a weird place where, it was very tedious last year. The whole the hype was real. It was crazy. Like, what a triumph! We got tons of rich people in a place, and it was glamorous, and it was yeah. That's why you take a race to Miami. That's why you do that. But I think the problem is there's a real good chance that Vegas is going to end up being the good one of these. Like, if the 2 things are on offer, like, where would you rather go? It might be about a par, but one of these things is on the strip. One of these things is, like, in the heart of the action, and it's sort of, like, woven into all the reasons you go to Vegas. And, you know, there's a lot of ways, like, right there as part of your race weekend to, like, make spending all that money feel good. And I think if I think Vegas kind of can't fail, even if it is not the most dynamic race.
The spectacle.
Because, the whole point is going to get those cars in the heart of Vegas and have the race concentrated there. And I think if that succeeds, I think Miami ends up in a bit of an odd place where it's like it's the lesser of the 2 like gimmick races, and it's not going to be a very exciting one to attend. At the very least, Vegas has the nighttime going for it. I think that's like, this is going to be, you're going to be sitting there watching cars go around a car park, and maybe you'll be doing that in Vegas too. But it'll be nighttime, and the cars will be backdropped against
shiny lights.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, one thing that might make it a little more interesting is the chance of rain. Qualifying day looks to be about 20%, and race day 30%. Florida is one of those places where the showers are unpredictable and brief. Humidity 60% with 86 degrees Celsius. That's going to be gross. That's 30 degrees. I'm sorry, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius. So yeah, it's going to be disgusting. But maybe we'll see some rain there. But before we head into Miami, let's look at the driver standings here. Max Verstappen is on top with 93 points. Sergio Perez, his teammate, has 87. Fernando Alonso's in third with 60 points, followed by Lewis Hamilton with 48, Carlos Sainz with 34. Charles Leclerc and George Russell both have 28 points. Lance Stroll's in 8th with 27. Lando Norris has 10. Nico Hulkenberg in 10th place with 6. Then we have a 4-way tie between Oscar Piastri, Valtteri Bottas, Esteban Ocon, and Pierre Gasly with 4 points. Zhou Guanyu and Yuki Tsunoda in 15th both have 2 points. Alex Albon and Kevin Magnussen both have 1 point, and Logan Sargent and Nick DeVries, the rookies, both have 0. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is on top with 180 points. Aston Martin is in second with 87. Mercedes is in third with 76. Ferrari is in fourth with 62. And then McLaren in fifth with 14. Alpine's got 8. Haas, Gene Haas and team, have 7. Alfa Romeo has 6. Alfa Tauri has 2. And Williams has 1. If you would like to join the leaderboards, you can over at the Shift+F1 Fantasy League with the link in the show notes. From the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, the podium looks like this, paying the stroll toll at third place. Second place is Formula One.
Oh, nice.
Very good. And then first place is a team name I don't want to read. And then overall, the podium looks like this. Third place, Porpoising for a Purpose. Number 2, Bankroll. And number 1, Mullets Go Zoom. Clearly
Beautiful.
a Valtteri Bottas fan. You can send us an email if you want, shift.f1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up on the socials using the links in the show notes. That's us around the internet. Danny, do you want to take us around the world?
This one goes out to my mom who's in the next room. Let's race around the world. Hey, 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 yeah.
F1 Academy is racing again this weekend with their second round in Spain at the Valencia Circuit. Ricardo Tormo? Super GT is at Fuji Speedway in Oyamacho, Suntogun, Shizuoka-ken. That's the prefecture. World Superbike Championship is at the Barcelona Catalunya Circuit for the Catalunya rounds. Formula E is in Monaco. Maybe you've heard of it for their Monaco E-Prix. We have the Craftsman trucks at the Kansas Speedway for the Heart of America 200. The Motocross Grand Prix, also in Spain. So much happening in Spain this weekend. For the Motocross Grand Prix of Spain at Xanadu. Amazing. And we got NASCAR. Also in the Heartland, Kansas Speedway for the Advent Health 400.
Get your advent calendar.
There's corn in it.
Maybe there's healthcare behind this one.
Maybe, probably not. Keep opening the doors.
Oh no, it's a bill.
Pre-existent. Oh, maybe tomorrow.
And Formula One is this weekend, Friday, May 5th. Miami kicks off free practice 1. It's the normal race weekend this weekend. 2:30 p.m. local or Eastern time, that is, on ESPN2. Free practice 2 is at 6 p.m. on ESPN2. Saturday, May 6th, free practice 3 is at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN, followed by qualifying at 4 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. And the race, everyone, Sunday, May 7th at 3:30 p.m. on ABC. Over the air. Break out the rabbit ears. Final thoughts on Baku, Danny?
Final thoughts. I don't have my book for the date, but I did find out that everyone can go to ESPN, and somehow I did it via Google. They do have an on this day. Maybe it's for every sport, but I literally found one that says May 3rd down the years. and it has given me 4 stories. Wow. I'm picking the shortest one because it's very funny. In 1949, this day in F1, Dutch driver Boy Hadji was born in Amsterdam. He made almost no impression in F1, only qualifying in 3 of the 7 Grand Prix he entered, and then failing to finish in any of those. His first entry at the 1976 Dutch Grand Prix was in a privately run Penske. The story goes that he was outside the qualifying time, only for associates to distract the officials and alter his official time to sneak him onto the grid. So hey, you don't have to be good, you just need to have good friends.
Wow. And the refs have to be like pro wrestling refs.
Yeah, that's
easily
like something out of
distractible.
like a like something out of a American teen movie or something. Final thoughts. Little Baku was I hope it's not a canary in a coal mine for what's going to be. We were already worried about the Red Bull dominance, but if nobody can overtake anyone, then I can't imagine Miami is the best place to go next if that maybe is a problem. I don't think they'll shorten the DRS straights this weekend.
Final thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't what I hoped on a number of levels, and I had been. I run hot and cold on sprint races, and it's one of those things where if you get 2 good races at a weekend, then it's like it doubles your fun, right? But if it's not going to be a good race weekend, it's twice the crap. And I think this is. I think this certainly made me suspect, that especially with this new format where it's completely divorced from the actual like Grand Prix, and there is no like carryover effect, it really just begins to feel like more, but not better. And have real misgivings about the format and kind of like what this heralds for the season.
Well, we'll see if things can turn around at Miami. In the meantime, if you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes and the official Shift F1 Discord, you can do so at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Meow.